I've written a picture for Benny and I. I wish Benny and I could do a picture together. It's called Wait Till the Swelling Goes Down.
I'm blown away by his lyrics, music, and I think he has very good choices of ladies and garter belts, which we all love a lot.
Many of Benny's jokes are jokes I heard in grammar school. The first slightly off-color joke I've ever heard, I'm sure that Benny's repeated at some time or another. And I've caught him at most of them. I'm not catching him because that's some of the humor. It's cornball stuff, and that's funny.
When I first went to the actor studio, there were 112 Marlon Brandos and 682 Jimmy Deans and 27 Carol Bakers. If you go to England, there's only one Benny Hill.
I had admired him like so many other people in the United States when he was syndicating his show here by saying, this is the funniest man, and his half hour is absolutely hilarious.
I hadn't heard about him. I didn't know about his program. But suddenly here was this man on television doing all the things that I find particularly amusing. And from there on out, I was hooked.
When I first found out the show was successful in America, I was absolutely delighted. I was thrilled because America was like the mecca of show business to me. I was brought up as a little child, Saturday afternoon, the cinema, Wednesday night with Mum and Dad if I was lucky, and was sitting there sixpence the dark. It was a big deal to me. So places like Hollywood and New York, well, you know, were sort of places you only dream about.
What I think the feminists don't have is a sense of humour. I mean, everything they don't realise. The feminists don't realise is that everything serious is sent up. They think they're the only ones who are being sent up. Everything is sent up.
He has no problem in just being this quiet little person in the corner watching life and listening and laughing. And that's unbelievable. I mean, for someone who is this, we think, from the Benny Hill show, this extraordinary extrovert, when in fact he's a people watcher.
He's not so shy with people that he knows terribly well. The team that works with him, he's quite confident. But if anyone comes into the studio that he doesn't know, or perhaps into the rehearsal room, I think he does tend to withdraw slightly and perhaps become a little bit shy.
Am I shy? I'm far too shy to answer that. I really am. I just couldn't. I'm sorry.
He's a very gentle man. And you'll find most of it's much like tough guys. The real tough guys are very quiet, and the real funny men are very gentlemanly.
My impression of him was someone who was an extremely good workman and a good artist, and someone who I worked with for a long time, and I know exactly the same about him as before, which is purely a public persona. I know nothing personal about him at all. I think he has a face like an evil cherub. I think it's a cherub sent by the devil. That's what he looks like to me. In amongst all the other good cherubs, you know, from up there, there's this Benny Hill sitting there waiting.
See, there's nothing as tasteful as good taste. There's nothing ever, anything that Benny Hill does that embarrasses you nor himself.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
We'll have you as daft as we are before long.
I adored Benny Hill. Funny, silly, outrageous, nonsensical.
And it is his Englishness of comedy which I think finds such favour abroad. I mean, you know, it's cream teas and changing the guards and Benny Hill.
I used to laugh out loud because I live alone. And when you can laugh out loud at a television show, you've got great art.
Benny Hill was the first comedian I ever remember laughing at when I was little. And I remember in our house when he used to be on, my dad used to just kill himself laughing at him. And I used to laugh at first, not really getting it, but then when I got older, sort of a little bit older, I used to think it was so saucy.
His kind of comedy, I think, is universal. I think it would have sold anywhere, even in the Far East, because the human foibles that he portrayed, he of course leaped a language barrier because it wasn't really necessary for the most part.
I loved his impishness, his cute naughtiness. Some of the things he did, if the same things were done by a more adult-seeming comedian, bordered on the objectionable. But I never objected to anything he did because he always seemed like a naughty little boy doing them.
I've got you a new
Benny was at heart, I think, always a child. He was also an adult and a very accomplished professional one, but he worked chiefly out of his childish self.
Why, don't you even know what grown-up is?
Nope.
Why, grown-up is being a man. Grown-up is you and me being together all day and all the time.
Well, see, I have a theory of what causes a comic. What makes a comic? What happens to make a person become funny? And my theory is that it is some kind of a hurt in childhood.
I remember we wrote something for Mrs. Merton, and I can't believe that people used to say Benny Hill was sexist, as he always used, you know, very good-looking girls in all his sketches. You know. But, I just think it's harmless. I just think what he did was harmless, and I think, you know, I think there's a...
I don't yell, I don't tell, I'm grateful as hell.
I'm the only girl sat here saying this on this programme, Aherne, but no, I never used to be offended. I just used to think it was funny.
It didn't bother me that he had all these sexy, cute, adorable young women around him because it made it funny, because obviously he wasn't going to get any of them.
To the politically correct, of course, everything matters. But I found his love of women was, for my generation, was very attractive, because that's what it was. It was an adoration of women, although he often seemed to treat them as a foil. That's in the grand tradition of comedy, it seems to me. Especially little boy comedy, which is what he did. He was a naughty boy. And that's a lot of Englishmen rolled up, or again, my generation of Englishmen.
There was one routine that I loved of Benny. Of course, I love them all, but this one comes to mind at the moment. The scene was a business office. Benny was at a desk looking forward towards the camera. And on one side of his desk, there's a big stack of papers, and to the right, a little notepad. And he's simply counting, making some kind of a record of the documents. So he's at this point, when we find him, he's saying 986, 987.
2043, 2044, 2045.
It was somewhat analogous to the way sexual material was handled in American burlesque. There, too, there was always a sexual element. There were lots of very pretty young ladies on stage, and the sketches were sometimes naughty, but they were never raunchily vulgar the way so much American comedy is now.
That kind of physical, visual comedy, which I dearly love. And we both had a mutual respect for people like Buster Keaton and Stan Laurel, Laurel and Hardy, and all those great, we talked a lot about silent movies.
I was at the same hotel as he was in Australia at one time, and I thought, aha, I've got him. I'll get to meet him. And I called him on the phone and we spoke, but he wouldn't come out of his shell. I am so sorry that I never got to know him personally. I think if we had ever broken the ice and shaken hands, or kissed and hugged, why not go all the way? But I never had that opportunity. He was a total comic. He truly, every cell in his body was a comedy cell. And he was a comedy heart and a comedy soul. Very few people could be that funny.